Okay, thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you very much, everyone, for a very full house and the opportunity we have here, hopefully, to share some of our experiences in TransLink and not disappoint. I'm going to be quite happy to say we mightn't just go as high-tech as some of the other people, bit of a back to basics, fundamentals. Sometimes in the past we forget those, so that's what I want to share with you in the next few minutes. Friends in TransLink know I'm coming on before dinner time when I can talk, so I'm going to try to do my best to bring this in on time, keeping the timer in front of me to keep an eye on it. Okay, we're going to double tag this, slightly different scenario. I'll set a bit of context. Stevie has done a lot of work on the practical end of how we assess conditions and some of the criteria we set, so let's get into it. Does this work? First thing I'm going to go to, yep. Good track, brand new, all new materials, dug out, high specification. In terms of determining quality, that's easy. And at the other end of the scale, you've got poor track, at the end of its lifespan, wet beds, maintenance problems, speed restrictions on. Again, I call that's easy. We know when we got to that. But it starts off good and it ends up bad. And what we're trying to assess is the deterioration in between. And this photograph is a piece of track that's doing reasonably well. It's no speed restrictions, no real issues, but how do we make sure that gets fixed before it becomes bad track? And for an organisation who's planning into the future, getting the right funding, planning workloads, we have to know what we've got coming, not next year or 2 years, 3, 5, 10 years ahead of ourselves. So just a little bit in the NIR. We've been quite lucky. We've now got our network all to CWR on concrete sleepers. Performance-wise, we're doing okay. There's no track condition speed restrictions out there at the minute. Delay minutes are very, very low. I think it was only about 1 or 2% last year, caused by track condition. So I think the case is we're doing reasonably well. And how do we keep going like that? Historically, the last 25 years or so is about the time I've been here. We've been very fortunate in the funding coming in to get us high-quality renewals. And when I say formation treatments, ballast, replaced and drainage included to get the high spec. Prior to that, it was more focused on getting rails and sleepers in. So with 25% on the high spec, with 75%, just not so high on the supporting works underneath. And traditionally in Northern Ireland, track had to get to a poor condition before we got the money to fix it. And what's looking forward is how do we stop that happening again? So what's our challenge? We've talked today about the ambitious thoughts of the railway, what's going forward. We've got to ensure the ongoing performance of the railway, try to inform our decisions for the short, medium, and long-term planning, and have a think about what's the most appropriate solutions for our railway system. And the output is we want to maximise the asset we've got, minimise the whole life cost, have a good idea of how we're going to inform remedial measures so we can form the long-term strategy which helps us to look at financial planning and workload planning. Some of the guiding principle for the permanent way, we've got this wheel. Not rocket science here. You maintain your asset as best you can to maximise its life. Do the simple core things to keep the asset performing as well as you can. When components start to fail, you fix them. Targeted replacement of components like crossing noses, insulated joints. At the other end, we do full-scale renewals when it won't work anymore. It's the bigger impact due to high spec, meet all the standards. And then there's the enhancements to get into higher speeds and that type of additional capacity on the line, more trains. Our principles, look, I'm going to say we're going to try and keep it very simple. We want it simple. We want to put the condition elements back in the hands of the people who are out there on our railway every day, the inspectors and the people who are out on the ground. Simple, objective, repeatable, a lot on the visual. Back to the fundamentals of visual, looking at things, and we'll bring in technology as we need it. We break our line down into 8th-mile sections like a lot of people do, and we assess S&C individually. And the key is to determine where our asset is on that journey, from the first photographs, from the really good to the really poor. And I say the really good and really poor is easy. It's the in-betweens that cause us the difficulty. So one is to determine where that asset is. Break it into components. No rocket science here. Start at the top, work our way down. How's our rails doing, our sleepers, our ballast, formation, drainage? Don't forget the geometry. And then there's physical features in the line which impact how it performs. With that, I'm going to hand over to Stephen. He's going to take us the rest. Or, sorry, not the rest, the next bit.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew.
Keep your eye on.
I'll be all right. Just going to talk about more practical aspects of condition ratings. So we designed these. They had to be simple, visual, standardised and objective. Designed a series of guidance documents to aid the user in making decisions on condition rating. So we used the sliding scale, as you can see there, from C1 being very good through to C5 being very poor. So as Andrew alluded to as well, C1 and C5 being very good, very poor are easy. You can spot it straight away that they're very good or they're very poor. It's the journey in between, from good through to satisfactory to poor, that maybe opened a bit more subjectivity. So this is what we're hoping these documents eliminate. So we're going to just talk about one of the key assets we have is ballast in a bit more detail, and then I'll just do a quick summary after of sleepers. So you can see C1, which is very good condition. The ballast looks very good, it's easy to score. It does everything it should do within the standards. Looks brand new, sharp and angular, good profile, free draining. Fulfills all its needs in providing support and stability to the track and gives excellent results to the maintainer. So we move on through to good condition. Not a lot of difference between it, in practical terms between that and the very good condition. It just looks a little more aged, looks a little bit older. But as you can see that there is some degradation creeping in. So beneath the sleepers we start to see an increase in fines of between 4 and 10% approximately. Moving on into sort of midway along the journey, if you like, into C3, satisfactory condition. It's not very good or very poor, as I said, a little more difficult to score and to assess. But we now see the first signs, visual signs of degradation, moss, evidence of vegetation and things like that on the surface layer. Fragmentation of the ballast pieces, just minor at this stage, water retention between the ballast pieces. Signs of voiding as well, possibly, with you'll know it yourselves, the telltale signs, the white patches that you can see in the distance. Now you see an increase in the fines beneath the sleepers as well, of somewhere in the region of 11 to 30%. And now within the cribs as well, you're starting to see contamination fines and detritus to the volume of around 25–30%. But it still provides good results to the maintainer, albeit there's some reduction in the durability. So moving on into poor. At this stage here, ballast pieces are fragmented due to the repeated loading of the rolling stock and possibly from the voiding of the pumping action of the trains. Repeated maintenance interventions as well, like tamping, are going to increase the likes of fines and stuff. So I mean, the research I've done on this, it shows that each tamping cycle per sleeper can generate somewhere in the region of 2.5 to 4 kilos of fines. So you can see how that has a knock-on effect over the years as well. So the ballast at this stage has become clogged with slurry. The water retention, it's just leading to a more exponential degradation of the asset because it can't get the water away. And the track support and stability are greatly diminished. And you now see an increase of fines beneath the sleeper to about 31–50%. And about 50% of the content of the cribs as well now. Very poor. I mean, we have very little of this, if any. You can score that straight away by looking at it from the pictures. There's more fines and slurry than there is useful ballast within each of the cribs or within the whole track bed. And you've now got the development and propagation of wet beds. So everything's going to be standing when the weather's not in your favour. Standing water clogged up through the ballast and the ballast shoulders. So nothing's free draining anymore. No durable results to be gained from any mechanical or manual maintenance activities because the ballast is no longer able to flow. So the knock-on effect of this degradation is going to have an impact upon your sleepers and their formation. So anything above and below it's going to suffer as well. And the only real remedy to this is full excavation and reballasting. So moving on to wet beds. Wet beds can be viewed as a key indicator of the condition of your ballast as it reaches the end of its life. So in addition to the outline methods I've just showed you about scoring ballast, we also consider the number of wet beds we would have per 8th mile, and that's overlaid to give us a picture of the overall ballast condition within an 8th. So to build a history of the long-term condition of ballast in a section, we would keep a good record of the number of wet beds we've treated locally. So that data can highlight higher wet bed recurrence, or where we've past removal hasn't proved the expected longevity that we had hoped for. So that the recurrent localised wet beds could be an indicator that a site's key for a heavier intervention or just localised repair. So, for example, ballast cleaning. So sometimes we need a bit more than a visual condition assessment. You need a bit of scientific data to back things up that you're seeing visually on the ground. And that's Translink then brought along the Ballast Asset Programme survey. So it backed up the results, as I said, of the visual assessments with a bit more tech. The surveys were done amounting to about 50 track miles using ground penetrating radar, and was also using automatic ballast sampling and test holes at alternate 100-metre intervals. So that detailed survey produced very specific data sets and gave information on the depth and the current condition of the existing ballast, similarly to other layers within the subgrade. So grave and curve analysis at each test hole also provided data to establish the size and quantity of the existing ballast and the volume of fines to determine potential return rates, for example, when we go to do ballast cleaning. So moving on to concrete sleepers, I'll just do a quick summary of the condition rating for concrete sleepers. Vital asset within the track. I mean, they're also a very, very good example in relation to condition rating, that condition rules over age. You can have concrete sleepers in the track, which we have for decades, and they're still performing well, and they're still in very good condition. So a quick wee video just to take you through the journey, from very good through to very poor. Very good sleepers, easy to score, they look good, they're fresh, clean concrete, but as they degrade you might see some dulling of the crisp outer edges of the sleepers, and a bit of rounding maybe occurs in the soffit areas and the undersides from loading and from tamping, Kango packing and things like that. So you move on through maybe to the satisfactory condition. You can encounter some minor gall and abrasion in the rail seat, but to about a maximum of 1 millimetre, but with evidence of centre cracking in the sleepers to a maximum of 1 millimetre. But it still maintains gauge and is capable of supporting the rail. At poor condition, you might have cracks up to 1 mil in the rail seat, and centre cracks now between 1 and 3 mil, but maximum of 3 per sleeper. At very poor condition, there's going to be larger cracks in the rail seat, possible exposure of the reinforcing tendons, and there'll be defective housings as well. So the sleepers are moving toward becoming ineffective, and at this stage they'll already be in the plan to be removed and replaced. So as part of the ballast condition, sleeper condition ratings, we did a little survey on the London Dairy line. This is a bit of a case study on what we did, but a bit of background to the section of track that we surveyed. This was relaid in the mid-1970s and was relaid with 50 kilo flat bottom rail jointed on concrete sleepers. There was no ballast or drainage or formation works done as part of this, and it was just pretty much concrete sleepers laid on top of the old ballast that had been designed for timbers and jointed track. And then in 2012 it was re-railed with CWR, and then in 2023 we undertook this condition rating, this survey. So what we did as part of the survey, we excavated test holes at about every 3/4 mile interval to a depth of about 200 mil below the bottom of the sleeper, sorry. And what we did notice consistently that if the ballast scored, for example, good or satisfactory on the surface, when you get down to 200 mil below the sleeper, it was almost consistently at least one score worse than that. So what had happened over the years, frequent ballast top-ups, it created a cosmetic layer that gave the impression that your ballast on the surface looked good, but in reality when you get down into the working part of the ballast, it was actually very, very different. Vast majority of sleepers that we took out as part of this sampling exercise proved to be in the good to satisfactory condition rating. So even after 50 years in less than favourable conditions, they were still performing well and still in fairly good condition. Can't talk about condition rating without covering rail. Rail could prove difficult to condition rate. It's a massive linear asset, many facets assets are to scoring it. Non-destructive testing provides the majority of our data to inform of rail condition. So we're talking eddy current and ultrasonics. Mostly they're going to identify the likes of your squats, your rolling contact fatigue, and the list can go on and on. Broadly categorise the defects into two camps of actionable defects and non-actionable defects. And minimum action codes or MAC codes will define the severity of the defects. So the number and the severity of these are plotted onto swim lanes, which Andrew's going to cover in a moment or two when he takes over again. And then that'll dictate the condition rating for that 1/8 of a mile. So later on in 2024, to further enhance the data that we have to inform us of the condition of a rail, we're going to have an increased campaign of eddy current testing. So, whilst NDT is an excellent tool in any railway's management of rail defects, there's always going to be a requirement for some visual inspections as well to detect flaws that can prove elusive sometimes to ultrasonic testing methodology. So typical defects which prove difficult to detect with the ultrasonic testing, mostly associated with the foot of the rail, primarily to do with loss of section, corrosion, or both. Other wear-associated defects, plastic flow, rail end batter, side wear, head wear, mightn't be picked up through non-visual assessment as well, such as the ultrasonics. So it's key that we know where these are to score the condition of the rail. Other issues that could cause potential concerns are SMW welds. So for those of you that don't know, it's the older type of weld, harking back to about the 70s. Less process and quality controls at the manufacturing stage and even in installation. They're difficult to ultrasonically test as well. There's a wide, very, very wide weld collar on them, which can lead to difficulties when they're being tested. So knowing where you have those will impact upon the condition of your rail. So if we have those within an 1/8 mile section, that will bring the condition rating down. Ingot roll rails as well. So they give rise to, if they're within an 1/8 of a mile, they'll also score that condition rating down a little bit. Because of the methodology and the manufacture of them, they're more prone to manufacturing defects like VLS, the vertical longitudinal splitting, as opposed to the more modern concast rails, which don't have those problems. So if VLS, it's important that you know where it is to manage it correctly, but also so you can put it under the swim lanes to inform you of your condition of your rail within that 1/8. So that's pretty much it from me, so I'll hand you back over to Andrew.
Thank you very much, Stevie. I'm going to talk about a few others. Stevie's very practical and been very much at the forefront of creating those little documents for condition rating. So we've talked about sleepers, rails, ballast, some of the key components of a rail. I'm going to talk about a few other things. You can't really talk about condition of your rail without talking about track geometry. I've left it deliberately to this stage because most people think of it as first and foremost. But you have to know how your track is performing, and I have to say a big shout out to our friends in Irish Rail who have given us back the EM50 after many years of exile. It's back in the north again. It's nearly the age of me and still doing quite well. Okay, track recording tells you what your defects are and gives you something to fix. I'm not talking about the minute we fix those, that's just general rule. The quality index we get, the standard deviation type data, allows us to look at where our track is and how it's performing over time. It's not just a single snapshot. We all know this. How much effort are you putting in to keep it that way? If you've just told that it looks good, doesn't mean it is good. So we have to understand what we're doing. But without that good data, you're in a tough place. Other than subjective, I think it's bad, I think it's good. So yes, we're very glad to see the EM50 back in the north. Drainage. I don't know about everybody else in this room, but as a track engineer, sometimes we can get carried away with the rails and the sleepers and the big yellow plant and all the fancy trains. And drainage, it's in every textbook. Get the water away and you'll be okay. I think as I was putting this together, I sort of come up with the notion that drainage is a bit like healthy eating and exercise. You know you should do it. You know you should do it. You know it'll do you good. But you might not get that quick hit return. It's going to take years and years and years. And we have definitely been guilty. And I did say at the start, the last 25 years, we've done well and getting good quality track renewals done, like 25% of network done. A lot of it is legacy. But one of the points I want to make, the people who built the railway didn't just come down with the last shower. They knew you have to get the water away or a track won't perform. And I hope it's not just us. I think we're all a little bit guilty of forgetting about it. It's hard to do. It's not very glamorous, boring, difficult work. And it can fall below the radar for a lot of us. And the point I want to make here is we have a poor record of our existing tracks and getting the drains fixed. Lots of times it does okay. It sits there okay, we're grand. But when it fails, and it's in that progression to failure, that it's not doing so well. You get the flooding, fair enough. That's just can't cope at the time. But what happens as the slow deterioration comes? The ballast and everything else are grand, but if you can't get the water away, you're in trouble. You've got to get in there and do it. But from terms of condition assessment, we know a lot of it in the 75% is old. It's very indirect approach, which is doing well and which is not doing well in terms of track performance. That's how we target the drainage areas. Formation, a bit more indirect assessment. The mindset would be, and I've shown a nice picture about a railway track that's probably 30, 40 years old, doing adequately well. We've had a railway track on our ground for 150 odd years. It's well consolidated, it's doing okay. I suppose where I'm coming from is here, the majority of a railway track is mostly hurt by ballast and drainage. The formation is relatively well consolidated. Using information on wet bed formation, track quality, all the various other things, we can home in on where the formation might be giving us trouble and target those for high spec, deal with the soft spots, get your design properly done, site investigations, etc., and put the drainage in. That will bring you long-term benefits. That's really, really expensive to do. High input, high output. If you get it right, you've got a really good railway line. And I say we've been lucky for the last 25 years, we've got that type of renewals. But it's 25% of our network, we've got the rest of it to do and keep right. So targeting where we need to do the formation. On our network, I often think in our little part of the world, if you've got a blue sky above you and nothing to stop you, you can generally tamp yourself out of trouble. But there's areas where this doesn't work. Over bridges, obviously, you get the clearance issues. They're usually in a cutting and at the bottom of the cutting, so all your drainage issues just multiply up and you can't tamp yourself out of trouble. So over bridges were identified as an area. Again, I think everybody in the room who does track work knows this. Level crossings, they're just more difficult to get at. And you have to close the road, resurface the road, do various things like that. They tend to be areas that give trouble. Plus you get all the extra dirt and whatnot coming from the road and the road traffic. Platforms, not so bad. Generally trains are going slower through the platforms and don't get as much abuse. But the good quality of installation so you can keep up with the tolerances you require for the step and distances. And S&C, we all know discontinuities with S&C, no matter how good you think they are, they always get a low quality index, or sorry, the other way around if you're putting up numbers. And you've got to take S&C separately, but everybody knows that. I'll just talk about S&C quickly. We'll talk about 8 miles for all our other bits, the plain line stuff. We do S&C individual. I'm not going to do all the details of this. We'll create a little sheet, break all the components down for each unit, look at the rails, the switches, all the elements, the joints, how well they're done. Particularly rail end pattern has a big impact on how well your S&C will do after maintenance. Look at your sleepers, give a condition rating for each one now on a full 1/8 of a mile. Ballast, a bit like plain line. A lot of our older sleepers are timber and there's much more forgiven on the ballast than concrete is, so we don't have the wet spot generation typically and we get away with a lot more. Top and line, we'll do a little visual assessment. I say put the power back into the people who are looking at it. Does this support what you see in the track recording vehicle? To give us an idea where S&C units sit. What's our results? Very quickly, coming out of this ballast conditions, we've got about 40% there in the good to very good, another 35% doing okay, and we're down to about roughly a quarter in the poorer conditions. Sleepers are all doing remarkably well. Even some of our older 30, 40-year-olds are doing okay, and rails, we've got to a good place now, but still some to tackle. Stevie mentioned this, we call this the swim lanes. We just put all this information together. Quite simple at the minute. Spreadsheets, load it all together, 8 miles, highlight where your features are, all the different colours just jumps out at you to try and give us an overall impression of what's doing well and what's not doing well. I'm not going to go into detail on that. There's a lot in there on how we use it a bit further down the line. But ultimately, for all this condition rating is well and good to have all the documentation. But what is it telling us, or where's it getting us to? I suppose where we're thinking about things like rail milling has been introduced in the last couple of years. Irish Rail were there first to regenerate the rail and take away those head defects. Ballast cleaning is definitely an option NIR wants to actively pursue to sort the ballast out, especially when we've good sleepers and rails are doing okay. The notion of retaining our sleepers, if they're still okay, let them stay there. I'm going to come back to drainage again. Refocus our efforts on drainage. Target it where it's needed and get the drainage working right, and I think the whole picture will pull together. And then there's areas that either the formation isn't right or it's the tight spots where we're having trouble. And S&C, individual components, try to enhance the life of them, take components out, replace them. Trying to think of bringing in composite sleepers to replace the timbers. Do a tamping scheme, get the alignment right, and target a ballast replacement. And then I come to the conclusion. We're trying to assess the spread in each category. It's a good, very good's easy, very poor's easy. It's the bit in the middle. Where are we on the journey? I suppose ultimately overall condition needs to come up so we never get to the very poor. But I need to keep an eye on this over-engineering idea. We can do everything perfect, get the perfect railway. We mightn't be able to afford it. We might be able to deliver it. But find out where we're going to balance the spend with the reward. And if we can do it right and get our workloads planned in the future, we've got a sustainable workload. Hopefully we get it right. We're going to win sustainability, performance and cost, which everybody likes to hear. They're nice sound bites. As a man in my department said, can we move from the business as usual to transformation of the usual? Come on, tying all back to our performing today and preparing for tomorrow type of notion that things are going to be very different in 30 years than they are at the minute. And thank you very much, and we're not far off.